Welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to unpack a truly fascinating and genuinely fiery text. We are diving into Chapter 2 of Swami Vivekananda's India and Her Problems. Titled Present Decadence, it is a deeply layered chapter on decadence, its causes, and its cure. Now, to set the scene, when this was written back in the late 19th century, India was grappling with the crushing weight of British colonial rule, widespread poverty, and a deep, agonizing identity crisis. The nation was at a crossroads, trying to figure out how a civilization with such a rich, ancient history had fallen into such despair. And even if you are unfamiliar with 19th century India or Vedanta philosophy, you are going to find Swamiji's insights on societal decay and radical personal responsibility striking. His ideas have a remarkable way of speaking directly to how we think about our own societies today.
Okay, let's dive in. To make things as accessible as possible, we've broken this down into a 4-act roadmap. First, the root diagnosis. Second, symptoms and antidotes. Third, the call to action. And we'll wrap up with some questions for reflection. Act 1. The diagnosis. Identifying the root causes of societal decline. So, in diagnosing India's historical decline, Swami Vivekananda steps into the role of a spiritual and social doctor. He's not interested in superficial band-aids. He wants the absolute root causes. And his very first move is to completely flip the way we think about blame, using the Vedantic worldview. Vedanta, in this specific context, is a philosophical stance of radical personal responsibility. He argues that there is literally no power in the universe that can injure a society unless that society first injures itself. He uses a brilliant medical metaphor. No bacteria can attack a human body unless it is already degraded by bad food or exhaustion. A healthy body passes through a diseased environment unscathed. So if a society falls, the underlying cause has to be internal. Now, it is easy to point fingers at external forces for your misery, but the principle of karma insists that we take the blame ourselves. It sounds harsh at first, but it is actually deeply empowering. Because if we caused our own downfall, we inherently possess the power to lift ourselves back up. We hold the keys to our own recovery.
Swami Vivekananda states this with a bold challenge. Stand up, be bold, and take the blame on your own shoulders. Do not go about throwing mud at others. He establishes an undeniable baseline for the rest of his work. Society degrades only when individuals degrade themselves from the inside out. You cannot cure a disease if you refuse to admit you have it. And you certainly cannot cure it by pointing at someone else. Now here is something that surprises a lot of first-time readers. Before diagnosing what went wrong, Swamiji actually defends the value of looking back at the past. Everybody in his time was saying, stop obsessing over your history, it is holding you back. He flips this entirely. He argues the opposite, that India remained in a kind of stupor for as long as it forgot its past, and that the revival of national life came precisely when people started looking into it again. The past is not a burden, it is a source of power if you engage with it honestly.
So what exactly did society do to injure itself? Swamiji points to 3 foundational causes of decline. First, a narrowing cultural outlook. He argues that society went into a shell like an oyster, building a giant wall of custom to isolate itself from surrounding nations, deliberately isolating itself from the ideas of others. And when you cut yourself off from the global exchange of knowledge, cultural stagnation always follows. To him, this was not just an oversight, it was a form of hatred dressed up as holiness. And the moral law is clear, none can hate others without degenerating themselves. Second, the tyranny over the masses. Swamiji points to this tragic self-defeating irony, a society that systematically neglects the very working class people who build its temples, farm its land, and run the entire economy. By giving them only kicks and disdain in return for their labor, the nation crippled itself. Third, the profound neglect of women. He warns that a society is like a bird, it cannot fly on one wing. A nation cannot rise if it treats half its population as lesser beings. He reminds his audience of the ancient principle that the gods are pleased where women are held in esteem. Yet his contemporary society had reduced women to mere manufacturing machines bound by oppressive rules. To him, subjugating women was not just a moral feeling, it was a total societal death sentence.
Which brings us to one of his most scathing critiques. Swamiji points to an absolute obsession with trivial, superficial religious rules instead of cultivating actual spiritual depth. He uses vivid, almost mournful imagery to argue that the deep, expansive spiritual philosophy of ancient India had been perverted into what he calls don't touchism. Grown men, supposed scholars, spent centuries debating absolute trivialities, whether to drink water with the right hand or the left, how many times to wash their hands to remain pure. He calls this a sure sign of the softening of the brain. When a culture loses its original power of grand thought, it just goes round and round the smallest, most trivial curve it can find, like a cooking pot. Religion became completely disconnected from character and service and entirely reduced to rules about food and touch. There is real grief in Swamiji's tone here, not just sarcasm. He is watching an ancient philosophical civilization disappear into its own kitchen. And the tragedy is that this kitchen religion directly contradicts their own foundational philosophy. Vedanta declares that one and the same conscious self is present in all beings, a universal spirit connecting literally everyone. When you sit with this idea, the hypocrisy of the society Swamiji is describing becomes impossible to ignore. If the same divine self is in you and in the starving peasant and in the women of your household, then subjugating them is quite literally an injury to yourself. You are harming your own soul by degrading others. Vivekananda saw this massive gap between high philosophy and cruel social practice as the ultimate sickness, draining the life out of the nation.
Act 2. Symptoms and Antidotes. Treating the everyday failings of the individual. Now that we understand those massive root causes, Swamiji zooms in on the micro level, our everyday individual failings. But before handing out remedies, he warns of two giant traps. On one left, you have the blind imitation of the West. This is someone who, after drinking the cup of Western wisdom, becomes entirely materialistic and cowardly imitates another race, growing deeply ashamed of their own culture. And Swamiji is particularly sharp on this point. He says that when a man has begun to be ashamed of his ancestors, the end has come. Imitation, he insists, is not civilization. An ass in a lion's skin never makes a lion. But on the right, you have the exact opposite extreme, blind, arrant superstition. This is the person who stubbornly defends every irrational village superstition as a sacred Vedic mandate. They mistake stagnation for purity. Every local folk belief becomes to this person a mandate on which the national life depends. He wants those bad spots excised, not defended. True reform, Swamiji argues, has to navigate firmly between these two traps. Having cleared the path of those extremes, Swami Vivekananda maps out our everyday symptoms alongside practical antidotes. 1. For profound physical weakness, he demands muscles of iron and nerves of steel. 2. For a crippling lack of faith, he prescribes Shraddha, an unwavering faith in ourselves. 3. He sees a widespread national character of childish dependence, so he demands real patriotism through vigorous self-help. 4. Where there is a lack of obedience, where everyone wants to be the boss, he says plainly, learn to be a servant first. 5. For pervasive jealousy and selfishness, the cure is organization and coordination of wills. And 6. For slovenliness in business, strict integrity and clear accounting. All of it is grounded and practical. Let's go deeper on a few of these. The most attention-grabbing remedy Swamiji prescribes is for physical weakness. Take a moment to really hear this. You will be nearer to heaven through football than through the study of the Gita. You will understand the Gita better with your biceps a little stronger. For a revered spiritual leader to say you need competitive sports more than you need scripture, that is a striking statement. His argument is that physical strength and strong blood are prerequisites for any kind of higher philosophical understanding. You simply cannot have a resilient mind in a desperately weak body. And that raw physical strength fuels the next great antidote, Shraddha, a profound, unshakable faith in one's own self. Vivekananda understood the psychological damage of imperialism clearly. A conquered people is methodologically taught that they are weak and inferior. Over generations, that poison seeps into the cultural bloodstream. So before any national problem can be solved, people have to reject that programming entirely and reawaken the belief that they are born to do great things. Strength is life and weakness is death. If you do not believe in yourself, you cannot believe in the future of your nation. So how do a bunch of strong, faithful individuals actually change a nation? Organization. But Swamiji points out that organization is completely impossible when people are intensely selfish. And he is blunt about how bad the situation was. Not three people, he says, can come together without hating and being jealous of each other. The secret to power is bringing everyone's separate will into one sharp, unified focus. And the only way to achieve that? The total absence of jealousy. You have to genuinely celebrate the success of those around you rather than tearing them down. He even reaches into the Rig Veda to make the point. The ancient verse says that the gods were able to receive oblations because they were of one mind. Being of one mind is the foundational secret of any functioning society.
Act 3. The Call to Action. A vision of renunciation and selfless service. In this final section, transition into the emotional crescendo of this chapter. Swami Vivekananda has laid out the cold, hard diagnosis and he's prescribed the bitter medicine. Now he moves completely away from critique and builds toward a deeply emotional, inspirational crescendo aimed directly at the youth. He wants his audience to bypass their intellect and go straight to their hearts. Just listen to the deep reverence in this idea. He completely challenges the traditional ritualistic notion of religion. Why go dig a well on the shores of a sacred river to find God, he asks, when God is standing right in front of you in the form of the poor, the miserable, and the weak? True patriotism and true religion, according to this text, are not found in kitchen rituals or forest retreats. They are found in the active, sweaty, selfless service to humanity. And Swamiji follows it up immediately with this. Are you seized with that one idea of the misery of ruin? Have you forgotten all about your name, your fame, your wives, your children, your property, even your own bodies? He is demanding a level of empathy so deep that it erases the ego. Before you can ever call yourself a reformer, the sheer misery of the masses has to keep you awake at night. This is not metaphor. He means it as a literal test of readiness. This erasure of the ego leads to Swamiji's grand vision of selfless service. He states that love opens the most impossible gates. Intellect alone is cold, but love can move mountains. The essential requirement here is renunciation. But notice, renunciation does not mean running away to a forest. It means staying right in the messy middle of society, pouring your whole heart into working for others, and throwing your own petty desire for fame entirely overboard. The crucial point is captured in this powerful warning. Kill self first if you want to succeed. Do not try to lead your brethren, but serve them. Swamiji identifies the arrogant love of power as the greatest threat to any good cause. The brutal mania for leading, he says, has sunk many a great ship in the waters of life. True leadership comes only from pure, unselfish service and a genuine willingness to be guided by those you work alongside. He even extends this to obedience. First learn to obey, he says, and the right to command will come by itself. Swami Vivekananda wraps up this charge with a final prescription. You do not need massive, heavily funded plans right out of the gate. What you need is infinite patience, infinite purity, and infinite perseverance. Be strong, vigorous, and sincere to the backbone. Truth is infinitely more weighty than untruth, and if you hold on to it without selfishness, you do not even need to fight for dominance. Truth and goodness will win by sheer gravity.
To conclude today's explainer, I want to leave you with a few things to think about. First, how does taking the blame on our own karma change the way we view modern societal issues? Is it empowering, or does it risk letting real external forces off the hook? Second, What do you think is our modern equivalent of religion in the kitchen? Where are we obsessing over trivialities today at the expense of the bigger picture? And finally, why is the absence of jealousy the ultimate secret to organizational power? Think about how that plays out in your own communities, your study groups, your workplaces. Take some time with these. They are not easy questions. Thank you for joining us. Keep learning, and we will see you next time.